Good morning, everyone.
So Nefertiti, you can start reading.
Oh, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Welcome.
Will they need anything special to like pen, paper, anything to participate with your session this morning?
A pen and paper would be good.
All right, awesome. And as folks come in, you can just continue to greet.
Okay.
Because they come in at different times.
Okay.
Here we go.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome.
Grand Rising. Good morning.
Good morning. So you can everyone can get a pen and paper if they'd like. And and what I do sometimes is I take screenshots of, when I attend sessions, I take screenshots. So you're welcome to do that as well, or get a pen and paper. And welcome.
All righty. Let's see. So, hey, family, if you know that your community members that you're normally here with are not here, just reach out. Stacy and Teresa, we don't have access to your audio. We just see the video, not the audio. So if you can activate that, that would be great so we can fully be with you. And Nefertiti, you can repeat what you need.
Okay. Good morning and welcome, everyone. So if you can get a pen and paper, that would be great. Um,
Let's see.
Welcome. Thank you for being here this morning.
Mhm. Let's see.
Good morning. Good morning, Joyce. Good morning, everyone.
Wake up, everybody. It's time to get up. Wake up, everybody. It's time to get up. Stay woke, stay woke, stay woke. It's time to get up. Stay woke, stay woke, stay woke. It's time to get up. We're healing, we're dealing, we're growing. Together, together, releasing. We're teaching, we're moving. Together, together, we're learning, discerning. We're striving. Together, together, we're leading, connecting, transforming. Together, together.
You have to unmute, sis.
Okay.
There you go.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Welcome. I'm so happy to be here today. Happy to see all of you. Um, so my name is Nefertiti Ankra. We're going to have a session today about self-advocacy, and we're also going to talk about the criminal justice system and some things to keep in mind with police interactions and recent criminal justice issues, and we're going to talk about self-advocacy, which is so important for us, especially for Black and Brown people, in this country today. So welcome everyone. Get a pen and paper. All right. All right, so we're going to begin today. I'd like to begin first by having a 10, let's say a 10-second just moment just moment where we call in the energies of our ancestors, on whose shoulders we stand. Our ancestors are powerful, and they're here, that we can access them. And so I just want to take a moment, to acknowledge the energy of our ancestors. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I think that is so key. I mean, it's key in everything we do, but I think it's really key for this, topic that we're talking about today, for self-advocacy. One of the things that always gives me strength is remembering that I stand on the shoulders of powerful men and women who came before me. And that gives me energy when I have no energy. It really, when I remember the advocacy that they had to do for self, and a lot of the, things that I have today are because, my ancestors, our ancestors, paved the way, and that gives a lot of strength. So I just think it's important to start with that. And so we all live in this collective grim reality when it comes to policing. And within this grim reality, I think it's important to know some things that are critical to know about police interactions. So I'm going to start with that and talk a little bit about the basis of police interactions and what to know. And at some points I'm going to stop so that, I can have people contribute. Because I definitely want this to be interactive. So I'm going to start with police interactions. Let me just. Okay. And so just so everyone has the lay of the land about, where we're going this morning. So I'm going to talk a little bit about police interactions, the NYPD. I want to definitely talk about social media, which is the new frontier of stop and frisk with the NYPD. And that's especially, I think relevant, not just to young people, but to all of us, especially Black and Brown people. And I definitely want to then, kind of shift and talk about self-advocacy and the ways that, things that have helped me, self-advocate, and that things that can help all of us self-advocate, which is important. It's so critical. Recently, I was reading an interview in Elle magazine, Tracy Ellis Ross, who I love, and she talked about the fact that self-advocacy, especially for Black and Brown people, is a form of resistance. And that is so true. So with that, I'm going to go into police interaction. So the first thing is that it's so important to protect yourself. Now, I know, and we know, if you've been, if people have been aware of what's happening, and when you're a Black and Brown person, that's not something that you can't not be aware of what's happening. It's not, there's nothing that can guarantee, right? There's nothing that can guarantee a positive interaction with police. But I think it's important, and even when you quote unquote do everything right, that doesn't necessarily mean that you will have a successful interaction. And yet and still, I think it's important to situate ourselves to know the things, especially over the years. So I've been an attorney for 12 years, and I've had at this point, thousands of clients. And I think that it's important to protect yourself. It's important to do everything you can, to protect yourself in the encounter. One of the first things I want to say that if you can record the encounter, record. However, if you can do it in a way that's not too conspicuous, that would be great. And I have here, be respectful and talk as little as possible. And, that's why I started with the whole, preamble that, with the grim reality of policing, we know that that doesn't always protect us, but I think it's important to ground us in that because, sometimes that does, determine the outcome of the interaction. And, I often say when I was in law school, I had a situation with myself and there were two other Black law students in the car with me, and we were around the corner from the law school. We were talking about one of the classes and, police came, and before we knew it, there were guns in our faces, and so, I mean, that encounter ended up fine. We explained, that we were here, we were about to go to the library, and basically somebody had just called. Somebody just called and said that they thought there was a robbery taking place. So these things can happen at any time to any of us. And I'm just sharing that to say that, I understand the experience is frightening when it happens. And so I just wanted to ground us in just trying to protect ourselves and record if possible. So street stops. I'm going to talk about different police interactions, street cars, and right now we're going to talk about street stops. So ID, is ID required? So IDs are not required, right, by law. So we're not required to carry an ID. However, it's ideal that you have ID because in a lot of cases, the NYPD, they arrest people, especially our young people, when they don't have ID, under the guise of, well, you don't have ID, I need to, figure out who you are, so I'm going to take you down to the precinct. And then next thing they know, they're charged with, disorderly conduct or some kind of violation. And so having an ID, a lot of times prevents, especially our young people, a trip down to the police station. And in this, I want to talk about police questions. So there's a case called People versus Dubois. And this case governs police interactions and the levels of police interactions. And there are 4 levels. And the final level is probable cause. The first level is where the police can ask you a simple question, a very, innocuous, question. And at that first level, you're not required to answer the question. However, it's probably best that you do, but let's talk about how. So if the police ask, you, where are you headed? I always say that it's the safest to just say you're going home. Because, I always, tell young people, if you say, well, I'm going to the McDonald's or I'm going to this store, I'm going here, you never know what has allegedly just happened there, or what that answer, will cause them to now look into. And so the best thing to say is, I'm headed home. Even though legally you're not, unless they have reasonable belief that a crime has been committed or a crime is being committed, you don't actually have to answer that question legally. However, it is best that you just say that you're going home. Do you have anything on you? The answer is always no. Always, always, always no. Because they are looking for a reason to arrest people. There's no reason to help them. Can I search you? No. And this is very important to say to not consent to a search. Because what this does is it allows, if you're arrested, later on the attorney can fight the search. And so the answer to that is no, I do not consent to any searches. In my experience, they will search anyway, but it is important, it's still important to not to consent to a search. And again, I wanna say welcome to everyone, for people who have just joined us. And we are talking about police interactions. and some things to know when interacting with the police. And, you know, as we're in New York City, it doesn't take much to have to have an interaction with the police. And so one thing that the police say when they stop someone. So I was talking about the four levels. So the first level, they can just ask, you know, your name, you know, they can ask you where you're going. But at that first level, they're allegedly just asking questions, and they have no reason to believe that a crime or anything has been committed. So at that level, legally, you're not obligated to answer, but it's best to just, you know, answer but not give any information. It's like, where you headed? I'm heading home. If they ask your name, you know, you can give your name, you can give, you know, where you live and that kind of thing. The second level, you know, they can ask you, you know, where are you going? Or, you know, and again, we're talking about, you know, you can just say that you're going home. But the level at which that you can be detained is when there's reasonable belief that a crime has been committed or that a crime is being committed. And lots of times they get that from either a radio run, a 911 call that they get, and then they'll say you quote unquote fit the description. And so what some of you know, my clients have done is that they ask the police, and this is a case by case basis, because again, you don't want to escalate the interaction. But you can say that, you know, I'd like to hear the call if I fit the description. Again, this is you really have to assess if you want to ask that then, or if you want to talk to your lawyer later about it. But this is something that you can definitely ask, because a lot of times they will say that someone fits the description, and it's an extremely vague description about somebody who's Black and has a certain height and is wearing, like, you know, Black clothes, you know. And that's something that we've fought a lot and had hearings about in court, because that's an extremely vague description. And so I also want to talk about a frisk versus a search. So when they stop you on the street, they are allowed to do a frisk, which is just a pat down of your outer, you know, clothing, if they feel that they need to do so for their safety. You know, so if they see a bulge, you know, in someone's pants and they think that that might be a weapon, they're allowed to pat down for their own safety. But they're not automatically allowed to go in your bag, your pockets, and such and search. The only thing that would allow them to do so is if, after they do the frisk, they notice something that really feels like a weapon, right? So then they're allowed to go in to see what this item is. Or if you consent to the search. So that's why I say it's extremely important not to consent to the search, because once you consent to the search, that takes a lot of ammunition away from the attorney to fight, you know, the illegality of the search later on. I want to again welcome people and ask if people have, you know, questions. If people have any questions about street encounters with police. And if not, I'm going to go on to cars.
Yeah, I know that Jacqueline, perhaps because she came in a little later, or maybe when you shared it, it wasn't clear for her, but asked if you said that you should or shouldn't, something about ID. I got to find it. Did you state that ID is required? Yeah.
So IDs are not legally required. IDs are not legally required. However, I always advise everyone to have ID, because I have found over the years, especially with young Black and brown people, that they get taken down to the precinct and possibly charged, normally with something that's, you know, a violation or not serious, by not having ID. So if they don't have ID, I found that you know, the police would tell them, okay, well, I have no way to, you know, write this down as to who you are or whatever, so I'm just going to take you down to the precinct. And so having an ID legally, there's no law that requires us to carry ID on us. So that's what I mean. But it's a really good idea. Before I leave the house, I make sure I have ID. Anybody I'm with, I make sure they have ID, because the police use that a lot to detain people under the guise of getting their, getting their information. So even though it's not legally required, I think it's very advisable to always have ID on you, especially in the case of being stopped by police. So cars. So the police are only supposed to stop a car if there's a traffic infraction, or if there's reasonable belief that a crime is being committed or a crime is being committed. And one of the things over the years that I realized is, from doing cases, is that a lot of times they would say that they smell marijuana, and that's really questionable depending on where they are and how the car passed by and whether or not the windows were rolled up. But so they are not allowed to just stop a car just because. So there has to be a traffic infraction, or they have reasonable belief that a crime is being committed. So they can ask, where are you headed? Again, I would say I'm going home. They can order you out the car. When they first do a sweep of the car and they look into the car, they're supposed to look and see if there's anything in plain view. If there's anything in plain view, if there's anything illegal or any kind of weapon or anything in plain view, or if they have some reason to believe that they look into the car and they have some reason to believe that a crime is being committed, they can order you out the car. I would say that, again, do not consent to a search. Again, I would say do not consent to a search. Now, they might do the search anyway, but again, I think it's important to not consent to a search. And then I want to talk about presumptions. So there is a presumption that when you're in a car, it's very important, and I tell all the young people this, is very important to be discerning, when you get in cars or what car you get into, because if they find a weapon in a car or marijuana in the car, everybody in the car, especially with a weapon, everybody in the car will be charged with the weapon. And this is true unless they find the gun, unless they find the weapon on somebody's person. If they find the weapon in somebody's pocket or on their person. But if the weapon is found in the car, or if drugs are found in the car, everyone in the car, even if you know nothing about anything, and you just got a ride and you just got in the car 2 minutes before the police stopped, everyone in the car will be charged with the crime. So I'm gonna go on to home. And I want to kind of involve people here. So does anyone want to contribute, like if you, in terms of home, if you didn't call the police and you don't want the police entering, right? Do you open the door? What do you do? I'd like, someone to contribute. What do you do if the police come to your door, to the house? What do you think is best to do? If anyone wants to contribute.
Don't open the door.
Sound like
Yes.
this ghost.
Drop
Don't
down
open
on
the
the floor and turn off all the lights.
Thank you. Yes, do not open the door. Do not open the door. And here's the thing. The reason why not opening the door is such a great answer is because even if you open the door and say, why are you here? I'm not gonna let you come in. What I've found the police do, and these are cases that we've had over the years, they will still come in and then write down that you opened the door. And therefore, they interpreted that as consent to come inside. And so it's really important that you just don't open the door. I would ask through the door, do you have a warrant? If they say they have a warrant, have them slip it under the door so you can look at it. And these are some of the things that a warrant should have. It should have a signature by a judge. It should have a very recent timestamp. I would say within the last week. It should have the areas that they're searching. So it can't just be a blank slate. Like, even though it has your address, and make sure that it has your address and apartment if that's applicable. and the area. So it might say living room, it might say a certain person's bedroom. And I think it's just important to look at that. And then the last time I did this workshop and, people were contributing, someone in the audience said something so critical that they actually took a screenshot of the warrant. And that ended up being so critical later on when they were in court, because they were able to produce the screenshot in court, and it was a faulty warrant. And so I've added that now to when I do workshops, and just thanks so much for the person that contributed that if you can take a screenshot of the warrant. And so that's home. A little later on, I'm going to talk about criminal issues, updates to laws, but I just do want to mention here that, as a result of a lot of the protests that have been happening, there have been some police reforms in New York, and also some police reforms on the national level that at least have passed the House. And so, we'll see whether they go through the Senate. And so one of the things that is being worked on is to try to stop the no-knock warrant. I normally try not to talk too much about the no-knock warrant because it is scary. It's not something that's, not there yet, but it is possible that, the police can go to a judge, and the judge is supposed to write down the circumstances as to why, they would authorize a no-knock warrant. And just to say what a no-knock warrant is that it's when the police get a judge to sign so that when they come to the door, they don't have to identify themselves. They don't have to identify themselves or say what their intention is. And so this is something that we're working on, getting that abolished on the national level. And it's one of the police reforms that have passed the House, but not the Senate yet. And so that's a no-knock warrant. So there's the no-knock warrant, there's an anytime warrant, there's a nighttime warrant. But all these things require that the judge explain and write down why they would request a nighttime warrant instead of an anytime warrant. So generally, if it's a general anytime warrant, the general warrant is supposed to be executed during the daytime. And if they want to execute it during the nighttime, they have to, state, some reason to the judge. Normally, the reason would be that they think that this is the time that, they can obtain the information or obtain the property that they're looking for. One of the reasons why they justify a no-knock warrant is because they believe that the property that they're looking for may be easily destroyed or disposed of if they identify themselves or they feel like they're putting themselves in danger. So hopefully, as we continue towards police reforms, that there will be safeguards. Hopefully it'll be abolished altogether, because quite frankly, I don't think a no-knock warrant is right at all. But they're working on reform so that people are protected as well. So that's warrants. Does anyone have questions about warrants?
We actually had a question a little earlier about the where did it go? About the laws that Nija said that she didn't live in New York, and she understands that these are practical but and informative, but is this New York law only basically? Or
Yes,
this
is New York law. This is New York law. I think the only thing that I would say, yeah, this is New York law. The what I mentioned about the police reform that's going to, to the House, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later, that's on a national level. But I think that some of the things, even though it's New York law, it's, I think it's good to know. For example, if you're stopped by the police, you can ask why am I being detained? Definitely don't consent to a search. I think don't consent to a search is true no matter what state you're in. It's just important not to consent to a search legally. It just helps the attorney later on in case you are arrested. So that I think transcends. But yes. So I think some of it will transcend just being New York State, but generally this is, New York State law. Like the case that I spoke of earlier, it's generally New York State.
Okay.
So if you're arrested, this is something that um, is nationwide. So exercise your right to remain silent, your right to an attorney. That is key. And I know it sounds really basic, but after years of practicing, it is key, because a lot of times when people are arrested and they're at the precinct, at that moment, I've found over the years that things are said that ends up like just making the case worse. And so I think it's important for people to know that legally the police are allowed to use deception. They're allowed to use deception to try to, make their case. So just because they tell, someone that, okay, we're going to let you go if you say this or if you tell us this, that doesn't necessarily have to be true. They're not obligated legally to tell you the truth when you're at the precinct. It is important to remain silent. I tell all of the young people that I mentor to only say your name, your address. Just give your pedigree information. You can give your date of birth, and that's it. And if the police offer you food, you should definitely not eat it, because that is a way they can get your DNA. I know food, cigarette, water, anything that can leave your DNA. I would say absolutely not. I wouldn't even do anything that where they can get a fingerprint. I wouldn't that they offer you a can of soda or something like that. So no, definitely not. Um, and the other thing I want to say about exercising your right to an attorney, and this is a national thing. So in New York, if you ask for an attorney, they're obligated to not continue to try to question you and get you an attorney. But there is something that is a nationwide thing that I want to be. So in other states, and this was a case that was outside of New York and that went all the way up to the Supreme Court. The client said that he wanted an attorney, and he added he said dog. He said, I want an attorney dog. And basically this went up to court, and the judges said, because he said, I want an attorney dog, he didn't actually ask for his attorney properly. And so I'm just saying this to say that it's important to actually just say, I'm not speaking, I would like an attorney. And I just also say this, this example to just say how sometimes unfair the law is, and that happens quite a bit. Because I think it's ridiculous to take the word dog out of context and say that he didn't really ask for his attorney. Okay. So marijuana. So even though marijuana has been decriminalized in New York, and that doesn't mean people don't get arrested for marijuana. They issue summons, now, and the fines are less. But I think it's important to note that marijuana is still illegal. It's still illegal. There are medical marijuana, but in New York, that's extremely convoluted. And it's extremely difficult, to get into like the medical marijuana thing. But so absent having a, medical marijuana permission, marijuana is still illegal in New York and New York City. And it is still something that they give out summons and arrest people for. It's at a much less than before, but it still happens. And so that's just something that I make sure I point out, because I cannot tell you how many times I've had a young person say, but it's for my personal use, and, think that means that, they're not supposed to get arrested for it, but that happens. The other thing I want to say that I didn't know until I became an attorney is that driving drunk, we all know that it's very dangerous to do, it can kill people, but driving drunk carries so much, like the penalties are onerous. It's just so when somebody is arrested for driving drunk, and they're charged with a DWI, one of the things I want to say too is I think that it's advisable if you know that you haven't been drinking. Let me say this. If you know that you have not been drinking and they stop you, then it's advisable to take the test. So what they do is that when they charge you with a DWI, if you refuse to take the test, they use that and as an inference against you in the case that you refuse to take the test. However, what I've found, and my colleagues have found after years of practicing, is that if you know you're drunk, and then it's better to not take the test. Because if you take the test and you blow, you know, something astronomically high, then when we get to court and we get to trial, the case is basically, you know, your attorney trying to fight the machine, you know, that maybe the machine was wrong. And that is, you know, very difficult to do. And so the best thing to do, you know, is obviously not drive drunk at all. But if you're stopped for drunk driving and you know that you're not drunk, you know, you didn't really drink, you know, then it's best to, and I'm saying you didn't drink at all. Like, I mean, I'm saying if you had 2 drinks, that's drinking. I mean, if you know you didn't drink at all and they're stopping you for some reason for drunk driving and you know it's safe to take the test, then you can take the test because the inference against you isn't good. But if, you know, weighing the pros and cons, I would say if you're stopped to take the test and you know that you've been drinking, taking the test and blowing a high thing, like it involves a lot, you know, you'll have to blow into, you know, a breathalyzer before you can drive. You have to take courses. It can cost you upwards of $2,000, sometimes $3,000. It's really just a horrible process to go through in court. And social media. Okay, so social media is actually the new stop and frisk. And so what we always tell our young people is that what we realized some years ago is that the NYPD, they have an entire section devoted to sitting on, you know, social media and monitoring mostly young Black and brown people and monitoring their social media. And this is connected to what exists in New York City, and some of you may know about this, called the gang database. So there's a gang database in New York City. Most of the people on it are young Black and brown people that are not in gangs, but they end up on this database if the police suspect they're in a gang. And I've seen the sheet that they use to determine whether someone is in a gang is so vague. So they have boxes as to whether or not you have gang tattoos. And by the way, there's no distinction. It's not like they have pictures of tattoos. They just say if you have tattoos, if you have affiliation with anyone who is in a gang. And that can include you stopping on the corner, you know, and high-fiving someone else and them saying, oh, that person's in a gang and you seem to be their friend and you have an affiliation with them. Location, if you live somewhere where there is gang activity, they will use that as a point against you. So if 2 of these boxes are checked, then they put you on this gang database. And it's something that, you know, at my job, we've been trying very hard and continuing to going to the city council and having various hearings to try to abolish the gang database, because it's extremely unfair and unjust to young Black and brown people to be on this list. And there's no way to get off the list because they claim that they do their research and after years they determine when you get off the list. Okay, I'm sorry, there's questions. So let me stop.
Yeah, Bielka, if you could.
Yes. So Nigel, I know you had a question. Would you like to come off of mute and ask your question?
Sure. Good morning, Nefertiti. Thank you so much for doing this. I love it. And I used to live in New York, and I remember being taught some of the things that you're advising that people do. My question was about stopping and being asked to take a breathalyzer. So if you know you've had 1 drink, and I live in North Carolina, and we drive a lot here. The public transportation system is nothing like New York.
Mm-hmm.
So often if you go out after work in in the Charlotte area, you're driving. And I have wine. And based on your advice, if I refuse to take the breathalyzer, or I do not consent to that because I know that I've had a glass of wine, what happens? Am I detained? Am I taken under arrest? What happens?
So I'm going to answer that based on New York law because this is specifically based on,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I understand.
So yeah, they will detain you. And so what they do is that when they stop you, they have a small before they even get to the breathalyzer, they have like this small device that you blow into on the street. And so you blow into the device and then they ask you to walk up and down. And based on that, they determine if they're going to detain you to take you to the precinct to blow into the breathalyzer. Um, and so if they determine that you walking up and down, you can't walk in a straight line, and you blow into the preliminary, thing that they have on them in their police cars in New York, if you blow that, then they take you to the precinct. Now, if you refuse to blow that on the street, they will still ask you to walk up and down. And in my experience, when you refuse, they do detain you. Now, that's not a legal thing. It's not like, if you refuse, they're supposed to detain you. So that's not legally. It's just that in my experience, I've found that if you refuse the breathalyzer on the street, I'm calling it a breathalyzer, but that's not what they do on the street. Is not a breathalyzer. I can't remember the actual name, but it's a little device that they ask you to blow into preliminarily when they stop you on the street. So I would say that just in terms of practical consequences, if you do refuse, they are going to detain you. And then an associated consequence with that in New York, and I'm not sure what that is in your state, is that they use the refusal they can use that legally as an inference against you during your trial. So that's like separate from being detained. And so what I was advising, and because, as our colleagues, we've sat down and really kind of like thought about this, and I should say, as a disclaimer, that everybody has to use their own judgment. As an attorney, I'm not telling anyone to disobey the law. I'm sharing my experience, and my experience over the years with various clients. So in my experience, you have to weigh the pros and cons of blowing. And so if you have one drink, it's a little harder to see if you have one drink, because what you blow depends on how tall you are, your weight. If somebody is like 200 pounds and 6'3", and they've had a tiny small glass of wine, that's different from somebody who's petite. So because the danger here is that if you blow and you blow something high, that is extraordinarily difficult to fight at trial. It is way easier to fight a refusal because no one in court, or no one, the jury, no one knows what actually, or if you drank, so that's a refusal that can be, fought easier. So I don't know if that answers your question. I'm sorry.
It does. It does. It's helpful. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Nefertiti, before we move on, can you give suggestions for those, because the Wake Up community comes from all over the country. So can you give advice to those who are interested in exploring what in their jurisdiction, what the laws are, what their rights are? Like, how can they pursue that so that if it doesn't apply to them, what you're sharing today, that they can get that information as a form of self-advocacy?
Okay, so that's a great question. And I think research, and this was something that I was going to get to when we talk about self-advocacy, research is key. So I would say that definitely, invest time to do research. And when you're doing research, I would say to find, to make sure that the source is credible. I would look for .gov sources. I would go to the court system website in your state as a starting point. Um, I would, if you're looking up a specific law, the sites that I would kind of take with a grain of salt. I mean, you can always go to private attorneys' websites. That's okay. You can do that as a stepping stone, and kind of, so sometimes they have links. They'll have links to .gov links, or they might have links to the court system. Or I would definitely do some research, because you can find laws, like, for example, if you were to Google now New York penal law, right? You can find the text of various laws. You can find, I would say, start with a Google search and try to find credible sites. Go to the court system in your state, and start there. Start at the website there. And sometimes going to private attorneys' websites is helpful. Sometimes, I mean, I would just take that with a grain of salt, but sometimes they have a page that has a lot of links where you can look up laws in your own state. I look for .gov links to look up laws, because a lot of times, I mean, I'm huge on research, and that's something that I might as well start talking about now in terms of self-advocacy. So, because I wanted to kind of get through police interactions and then shift over to talking about self-advocacy. So when I was thinking about doing, this session, and I was thinking about self-advocacy, especially self-advocacy, as I said in the beginning, as a form of resistance. One of the things that I was thinking about is that self-advocacy is knowledge, plus confidence, and so the knowledge piece really ties into the question, Shawnee, that you just asked. And I think it's really important to get research, because I know, some attorneys like to act like we know everything, but we actually don't know everything. And, everyone, all of us do a lot of research on topics to find out, more information about things. So if I'm faced with, like when my sister comes to me about an issue in school, for example, or my family member comes to me, with an issue about employment, I'm researching everything. I'm asking questions. So, who is the employer? What's the employee handbook? What's your policy? What policies do you go by? And I think that one of the things that has helped me is to just think very analytically and just arm myself with knowledge. Because I have been able to, help people that, I didn't know too much about the situation, but I was able to research it, look up the various laws involved, read it and see, if they're following all the laws. So, and this is something that all of us can do. So I think arming yourself with knowledge is key, and really trying to weed out, when you go on Google, just weeding out, sites that are not credible, and looking up laws and policies. And I think that the court system website is a good start for that in the state. And the other thing I wanted to talk about too is confidence. So I just wanted to say all of us have inside of us what we need to self-advocate. All of us are powerful beings. And I think because we're human, it's just normal that we're prone to sometimes forget that. And think that we need, some outside kind of, strength, or we need some outside thing, but we have everything we need within us. And one of the things that, has helped me greatly that I practice, because, you have ebbs and flows. Sometimes you might feel very confident, and then sometimes you go, you go under. And I think that's a normal part of just life. I'm sorry, does anyone have a question before I go on, or a contribution, or want to say anything?
Actually, someone had asked a question when you were on the breathalyzer, And the question was, could you refuse a breathalyzer if they take you down to the precinct after you refuse the street machine? And if so, do other substances show up on the breath test?
So no other substances show up on the breath test. They only test for alcohol. And yes, you can definitely refuse the breathalyzer after you get to the precinct. I would say in most cases, you know, I would say in most cases, this beneficial to refuse, unless you really just know you just didn't drink anything. You just took one sip of something. But yes, so you can refuse at the precinct. And no, other substances do not show up.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. And so I thought one of the things that helps me a great deal is doing like just sitting down and centering myself and doing like affirmations. And it took me a bit to get into like even self affirmations, right? Because I think I was just skeptical, but they really work so well, and they work like just fast. And so I always tell myself like, I am complete, I am whole, I am brilliant, and these things repeated, especially for me, like I am whole, I am complete, I have everything that I need within me, I am loved. These things really help regain the strength we have within us. And one thing that I really want us to remember, just in general, is that all of us have the strength that we need within us. We are all powerful. We all have something unique that we're, bringing to earth, as humans, as spirit and humans in this earth. And I think that just remembering that is key. The other thing too, I wanted to that something that I read that was just so mind-blowing and just like really amazing is there's a book by Sonia Renee Taylor, who's amazing. The Body is Not an Apology, and I'm sure you guys probably already know about this, but I just read this like a few weeks ago, and she talks about radical self-love. And radical self-love is just like on this higher level that even blows self-confidence away. Because one of the things she talks about too is that self-confidence sometimes self-confidence can be a facade, right? You can put up something, and not really feel it all throughout. And I think that if we get to a point where we have radical self-love and we truly, truly, truly love ourselves and not just accept ourselves, but we truly love ourselves, we can get to that point where self-confidence comes from outside and glows without. And something else I wanted to say in terms of tips to help us self-advocate. In addition to just knowing that you have the power, is I always remember on whose shoulders I stand. And I remember my powerful ancestors. I remember, my grandmother and my father. I remember, ancestors in my lineage standing up, and confronting systems of injustice. And that really gives me power. And I think that would give us power when we remember that this is not something, we're not facing anything new. We're not facing anything new. We're facing things our ancestors have faced, and we stand on their shoulders. I think that is extremely powerful and gives me strength. And the other thing I wanted to say about self-advocacy that has helped me, I would say, since I can remember law school. So my father, in addition to being, a powerful African traditional priest and civil engineer, he was also a master hypnotist. And I know people have, the media has like kind of distorted images of hypnosis, because you can't actually make anybody do anything, through hypnosis or anything like that. But one of the things that somebody's raised their hands, I'm gonna pause.
Stacy, if you'd like to come off of mute.
Hello, good morning. How
Good
are you?
morning. Good morning, Stacy.
Hi. How are you? You look beautiful. And I have a
Thank
question.
Yes.
Yes. So I'm listening to all of these, and it's so great to hear, and I'm taking notes. What I'm interested in knowing, if you know, or as far as these laws go, like, are there anything that pertains to the spectrum that's on the spectrum of all? Are there different, I don't know, not because I don't know of any, are there any laws that are put in place or specific conduct that law officers have in place when approaching people who they think have mental challenges or any special needs? Or what extra like arm ourselves with to know like, okay, this is what I know as my right as well? Is there anything like extra? Were you
Okay.
Okay, Stacy, we're having a hard time hearing you. So, yeah, if you could just share if there's anything in
Yes.
particular about children who are maybe on the spectrum. I too am a mom of a son with autism, so that's a big fear for me. Is having him out in the community, not knowing what he may encounter. So if you could speak a little bit on that, that would be great.
Yes. So I have to say that that's a fear for me as well, especially when it comes to the police. And even though, there's some things that I'm about to talk about that, there has been some police reform as a result of the protest, specifically when it comes to, people that are differently abled, the police and the police, there's still a huge danger. There's still a huge danger. Um, as far as I know, in all of the years that I've been practicing, and my family's from California, so I can even, speak about that in terms of my family and the police. There are no safeguards or, any kind of special way of dealing with people that are specially able. I mean, that are differently abled, as far as I know, over the years of practicing. That's one of the things that my colleagues and people who are actively involved, in the whole defund police um, um, movement, that are really going towards. And I know, there are different interpretations of defund police, but part of that is making the police responsible to the community, and for example, like that, like having social workers, having people that are going to deal with any kind of behavioral issue, or any kind of people who are differently abled, or people who are mentally ill. So that's not something that I can report that there's been progress about. And I have to say, personally, that's something that I just would be very afraid of. Like, I've attended the funeral of a family member of a friend who was killed by the police, and he was mentally ill, and the police, and this was in New York. So I'm sorry that I don't have anything to say, except that that is a fear of mine, and I'm hopeful that we are able to restructure the police in a way that has them responsive to the community, and not just looking to the community like all of us are perps to arrest, but that we are humans and family members, and people, and have, people to deal with, situations that the police are not equipped to deal with. um so I'm
Uh,
sorry.
yeah, well, thank you for that. But a couple of quick things. We are at the 8 o'clock hour. I have put inside the chat your contact information if you'd like to just share that with folks if people do need to leave. And I know you have a few more slides, so I don't know if you're going to move through those or if you want to stop the slide and we can continue. I'm not sure which way you want to go, but if you want to, you know, close out the folks that have to leave, that would be great.
Okay. So thank you for everyone that has to leave. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I hope that this was helpful. And a couple of things I just want you to take away: that you have the power. You have the power within you to self-advocate. And I would also want you to just take away that, you know, in the case of any police interaction, don't say anything to them. And thank you so much. Thank you for joining today. And like Vilka said, my information is in the chat. So if you have any legal issue that you'd like to, or anything that you'd like to speak to me about, my specialty is criminal, criminal law. However, if you have a housing issue, benefits issue, some other issue, there are 1,000, other attorneys, at my firm that I will, lean on and email and see if they can help the community. I am a community justice attorney. This is what we do. But just please put in the subject line that you're from the Wake Up Everybody community. So I know that you're from the community and I will call you back. And thank you so much for coming, for those that have to leave.
Great. And just for a tidbit for those of us who do have people who have special needs, one of the things that I did for my son was I took him down to the precinct and introduced him to some of the police officers that parole the area where he likes to go, so that they knew who he was and that they knew what his condition was, so that if they saw him, they understood. So that was just something that I found worked, and it actually came in handy when he was in high school. So that's for those of us who may have younger kids, and if you have, like down here in Florida, we have school resource officers. That's a tip that you can do. So, okay, you can go ahead and continue on. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for that tip. I think that's really critical and key. And the other one thing I wanted to say, that what I've seen, especially parents do, is they join like the police community boards. And that's helpful as well, to build ongoing relationships with police in their community. That has been helpful. But thank you so much. And so I just want to talk about the recent protests and the reforms that have happened as a result of the recent protest. So before the recent protest in across the country, in New York, the only way that you could get records of police officers, to get like misconduct records, because a lot of times that comes in handy when you're doing a trial, and you may have anecdotal stories about certain police officers, and it's very helpful to get records that uncover certain misconduct against police officers. The only way to get it before this recent reform was you had to go to a judge and get consent from a judge and get a court order. And that was extremely difficult, to get. And so that's very unfair. And one of the things I have here is that, when you're charged with a crime and you go to and you go to trial, your prior bad acts can be used against you. And there's a whole, a process for that, that before trial, as to what can come in and what can't come in. But with police officers, before the repeal of the Civil Rights Law 50A, you could not get a police officer's documents. So the good thing is that has happened since the protest, was that this has been repealed. So now people can get police misconduct records. You can get records of police officers. So that is something that has happened since the resistance, protests have started. So yes, I have here like pressure from demonstrations after the killing of George Floyd. You still have to do you have to do a Freedom of Information law request if this is, if there's no criminal case and you just simply want the records, you have to do a Freedom of Information law. However, if it's a criminal case and this is an officer involved in a criminal case, you should be able to automatically get the records of that officer. So that is a good thing. And in criminal cases, this would include any internal affairs documentation. If anything has been filed against him in internal affairs within the police department, NYPD personnel files, and CCRB, so the Civilian Complaint Review Board, is a place where you can call, civilians can call to report police misconduct. And I know, like, a lot of my clients, when I talk to my clients, they're very, and rightfully so, kind of disillusioned with CCRB because a lot of times nothing happens. But what I say to them is that it's still important, if there's been police misconduct, to call CCRB and to report it, because now you have documentation of what happened. And this can be important in even future criminal cases where we can subpoena CCRB and get the evidence and get the evidence brought into court. So these are all information you can get as a repeal of the law. So I'd like to ask right now, does anyone have questions, or has anyone had any police involvement that they'd like to share?
Okay. Okay, so Teresa, I see you have your hand raised. Have you had an engagement with the police, or would you like
Yes,
to?
I have a question, and plus I deal with this on a daily basis. I live in housing, and the thing that what I'm concerned is that like there's a lot, there has been like a lot, there's been like two killings rather, out here by my building. And I find that like I live in the front, and so I can see the police sitting like right across the street from my building. And I've just got really, you know, kind of disgusted by it, because I feel like they're just sitting there, and it's like unless before this thing happened with all the protests, like if something just started, they would come, they would intervene. But ever since Corona or what, and the stuff that's going on with them, you know, losing funding, I just feel like they're just sitting there, just watching stuff happen. And it doesn't make me feel comfortable as a person, you know, who is a senior and have to go out and, you know, wonder like, am I going to be protected? Actually, even when you're calling the police, sometimes they don't come here, maybe because of, you know, my building. But it doesn't make me feel comfortable. And then the other question is that as a former disability advocate, we used to lobby for different laws and stuff to get passed. And I was wondering, do they still have people that are lobbying to get, you know, bills passed? Because that, you know, that was one of, you know, the specialties that I work with, was to make sure that people that had disabilities were getting their rights. You know, we used to go to court, we used to go to Capitol, we used to go to Washington and the Capitol. We used to go into the Senate, different places, to make sure that bills got passed for people that with disability. And I don't know, the agency that I used to work with, I don't think that they're doing it to the degree that they were when I was doing it. But people were lobbying. And is there any, like, your legislators that you can call to make sure that, you know, these kind of things, the bills and stuff, is being put in place? Because this is something, I had a medication, I had a problem with a medication one time, and I was put in a mental institute overnight. And the way that the staff treated the person who had a mentally ill person, it was horrible. So I can't imagine how the police would treat him if he was out in the street. But the staff at the hospital was horrible. And I told the lady, you know, even though I was having a problem, I said, Miss, I said, the way you're treating these people here is horrible. So later on that night, she came and she said, oh, Miss, I'm so sorry, you know, for how I handled you. I said, it's just not me, but it's other people that was here today. And even though I was having like kind of like a mental breakdown, it was as if I had a good mind and I had a mental breakdown all at the same time. But she came back and she apologized to me just because I called her out on what she was doing. So it's like, how do we call people out like through lobbying or different things that we can get help. So this does not happen to other people, and there's a lot dealing with sometimes. That's all.
Well, first, thank you very much for sharing. Um, Thank you. I want to kind of address your question in three parts. So first, I want to address the lobbying. So yes, there are attorneys and different people who are putting pressure on the politicians to lobby for various laws and protections. So that is still happening. I know that my firm is involved in and trying to make sure, like, for example, to shut down the gang database, because this is very harmful to Black and brown people. One of the things, so lobbying is still happening in a way that everyone and can get involved, and that you can get involved, is that you can find out who your local city council person is, and you can contact the state senators. um, One person that comes to mind, Dinah Washington, Jesse Hamilton. I'm not really sure if Jesse Hamilton is still a state senator, but I think that contacting local politicians and putting pressure on them to advocate or to lobby for certain laws is extremely important. And I thank you for raising attention to that. That is happening. There are various organizations some organizations are involved in that full time. And I know that there are law firms and attorneys that are working on that. For example, the no-knock warrant that I talked about earlier, I know that there's a bill that's, we're trying to get passed to modify the no-knock warrant, to modify it so that, for example, they can't execute a no-knock warrant during nighttime. So that's an example. I mean, Letitia James, love Letitia James. See her at every community event that I go to. So definitely contact your local politicians. That would be a great way to get involved in lobbying. And the other issue with the police, yes, it's horrible, that we have constant police presence in our neighborhoods, but not police protection. And the other thing I wanted to say is that, so the police have not been defunded. I feel like this might be some kind of a strategy. So, for people to think, oh, the police, are not responding to things because they have no money or something, but that's not the case. They still have money. They're all getting paid. Their cars are not being reduced. Police cars are not being reduced, So, and I'm saying that because I've heard that, I've heard it quite a bit. And I think that, I know that the police are greatly against defund police. I've heard that. Oh, sorry, there's an echo. I know that the police are greatly against defund the police, and I think that hopefully that's because they don't understand what defund the police really means. It's not about, even though I know different groups of people have different interpretations of what it is, it's about restructuring the police so that they're actually protecting the community, right? They're actually protecting the community and being responsible to the community and treating the community as humans, families, instead of just people to arrest. And the way the police department is structured now, that's not happening. So it's really horrible for me to hear what you're saying, that they're just sitting there, and I'm hearing on the news and people are talking about, defund the police and crime is going up and that kind of thing. But somebody said, I wish they could abolish that term. I think the term maybe is confusing people, because nobody's saying, let's get rid of police. Let's get rid of all police and not have any police at all. It's just that the structure, it needs to be restructured, and that kind of goes past reform. Like, reform is good. Don't get me wrong. Reform is good, but we need more than refund. We need more than reform. We need more than reform. We need a restructuring. Like, for example, what we talked about earlier, we need social workers. Like, some cases where we call the police, it's not to have our loved ones arrested, it's to get help. And there's the way the police is structured now, there's no way to get that help without possibly exposing your loved one to getting arrested for no reason, because let's face it, that happens all the time, or worse, get killed. So that's the defund. We need to restructure the police into to something that actually, cares for the community and builds the community and protects the community. So that's what I mean. That is what I hear when I hear, defund the police. And I can share later on. I can email. There's a group of Black and brown women that put together a whole. It's just a great proposal about defunding the police, which is restructuring the police. It's amazing. I'm gonna try to share that to the Wake Up community afterward. I feel like there's something else that I didn't address.
So the question has been asked a couple times. What does the CCRB stand for?
Okay, so that is the Civilian Complaint Review Board. And so they are supposed to, like, civilians, lay people you can call and report misconduct by a public servant. A lot of times, cops. So by civilian, any one of us, we can call the CCRB and report some kind of police misconduct. There's supposed to be an independent entity. So it's the Civilian Complaint Review Board. Yes, there's supposed to be an independent entity that investigates complaints, police complaints, and then proper action is taken. Now, over the years, I don't know. I don't know if I would say proper action has been taken, but I always advise that it's important to if there has been police misconduct, to notify the CCRB, because I have had trials where, subpoenaing the CCRB and getting the records, getting tapes, documents of like stacks of violations against an officer has helped in a trial. So I still think it's important to document that with the CCRB, especially in the case later on, it may be important in a trial. I know that there's been a restructuring of the CCRB, so hopefully, moving forward, there's some accountability happens at the end of the investigation, because they're supposed to be more independent than, for example, going to the police and having an internal affairs investigation started.
Okay, wonderful. There is another question by Glennis. Are we allowed to request the officer's oath of office to make sure it's up to date?
I would request their badge information. I would, because if they have a badge number, they're supposed to have a badge number. If they have that, then they're up to date in the sense that they are current police officers. So I would ask, I would definitely get their badge number, and sometimes you have to get that in a way that's not conspicuous, especially if they have an attitude, which I've actually had before. They stopped an Uber for no reason, and I'm asking them, and I'm in the Uber, and I'm like, why did you stop this car? There's no traffic infraction. There's no crime being committed in this car. So I would get their badge information to answer that question.
Okay. Okay, and I see, Louise, you have your hand up. We are at 8:19, so we will be wrapping up shortly. So if you could ask your question or your comment, so we can move along with the hour, keeping the hour in mind, that would be great. So you can unmute.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for this conversation. I wanted to find out whether or not you were aware of a minors as fillers bill in Queens, I guess back in 2017, as there was a young boy, or I guess a young teenager who had committed a crime, and they needed some teenagers to be able to fill it. So they went to the local high school, which my son had gone to, asked to try to have a few students fill in, and the school absolutely refused. So they went to wait for after school down at the local fast food restaurant and asked some students, some Black students, hey, would you like to come to be a fill-in at the precinct, and they offered them $10 in pizza. I do understand that this happens all over the city. So several young men did go, and they did not have parental consent. Apparently the police policy was they were supposed to have parental consent. They did not. When they got to the precinct, and this is with undercover, you know, unmarked cars that are taking these boys to the precinct. And so police policy is they're supposed to ask parental permission. I think they did not get in contact with one of the parents, but they still used that particular boy in the lineup. So the PTA got a hold of it. We had a big whole discussion. The local police, you know, commander came, and they pretty much lied to us and said, hey, if you're 16 years old, we don't need your parental consent for you to be in the lineup. But they were addressing mostly Black and brown people, so they figured we weren't going to do anything. But they did not know that many of us were involved in civic duty. So several of us, including me, we went to our local council people, we went to the state senator, found out that they were lying. We went to the community board. So because of that, they end up introducing, it was a whole big thing, and my family was scared for me. They're like, you're going up against the police. And I'm like, this didn't happen to my child, but it could have, you know? So we actually were able to get a bill introduced. We went to the community board, and then it was a whole thing in the paper too. We were able to get a bill introduced, 0535, through the city council in New York, that minors as fillers, which would have the police having documented parental consent before they approach a young person to try to get them to be as a filler, you know, because they're taking your picture. We don't trust what they're doing with these pictures. They say you're volunteering to go line up and so forth. So we're trying to actually get hearings on the bill that was introduced, and we were really pushing forward, but with COVID, it kind of slid it back. I was just curious to know if you had heard anything about that, or, you know, them pretty much approaching young Black people in the street to say, hey, come and be in this lineup. Thank you.
I am so happy that you shared that. That is so powerful. I did not know about this. You know, I know that they approach young people on the street and kind of like, quote unquote, get them to volunteer, you know, to come into lineups. But no, I did not know about this bill. Thank you so much for sharing. That is so powerful. That is so powerful. And that is just an amazing example of the strength that we have, and that, you know, we self-advocate, because that is exactly what you did. So thank you for that. Thank you so much. And if you could put, you know, if you have any information or anything, maybe you can share that in the Wake Up Community Facebook, you know, as well, about the bill. That is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. So yes, a lot of times I'm on the end of, you know, going to the precinct to make sure that the lineup is being conducted legally, you know. And so it is amazing to hear on the other end of how they're getting the fillers to come to the precinct, you know, because I'm normally on the other end standing in, you know, with my client, you know, to make sure that it's being done legally. And you know, everything is right in terms of the fillers, that they're, you know, they're not making my client stand out any kind of crazy way. They're not being suggestive to the complaining witness, to the victim. But thank you. Yes, you rock. Thank you so much for sharing that. That is powerful.
I wanted to share something, just because Nefertiti, you and I spoke about the spiritual aspect of your work. Just hearing what Louise shared, what comes up for me is the spiritual and the psychological. So what does it mean for a Black or brown young person to be warming up to this dynamic of being profiled, being harassed? It's like I'm volunteering to stand on a lineup, and you view me, the people asking me, view me as suspect, as the suspicious one, as the one who is a potential perpetrator of crime. But then you're coming to me asking me to help you out so you can jail other people who look like me. You know, so the spiritual and the psychological come up for me, because it's just like in our communities, we're dealing with this insidious view about our people in general, but definitely young Black men. But you can come and ask us to do you a solid and stand on a lineup that you might end up having me be on because you think that I'm or you're trying to project that I'm the one that committed a crime. So I hope what I'm saying is clear, because it's coming up with me as Louise was speaking. I'm like, this is so weird. I'm gonna give you pizza and a soda today to be on the lineup, but next week you might have me on the lineup because you're declaring that I'm a criminal. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that, Shawnee. It's the psychological impact is horrible. And a lot of times, it's not that legally they can just get, an adult, but I think that, from being on the other side so much, to hear that they're just pulling in our children is really horrible. Because I know that, like, from practicing early on, a lot of times some precincts would get people who are out, who are already, considered suspects. And I'm not saying that that's okay, but, that's preferable, to somebody, who's already being charged with a crime for something. That's preferable than to get our children, 17, some of them may not have ever been arrested before, and then they're in a lineup, and the psychological impact, of that is not good at all. So yes, thank you for sharing, Shawnee, and thank you, Louise, for sharing and for creating dynamic change, which is what self-advocacy does. Thank you. Oh, so the one slide I just wanted to say before we leave, the one slide that I didn't get to, I just wanted to mention something else that came out from the protest, is that in New York, we were able to get the anti-chokehold bill passed. And that it's named after Eric Garner. And so that stops the police from using that move that was used to kill Eric Garner. And that's as a result of the protests as well. And what I read an article the other day that it looks like some groups are trying to roll that back. Oh, somebody's requesting the slide. Some groups are trying to roll that back, claiming danger to the NYPD. But the thing is, a lot of cases where they claim danger to who are the people dying? It's not the NYPD that's dying. Like, okay, so I just put it up, the Eric Garner anti-chokehold law. And so, and this is a major, to me, this is a major victory, a major, reform that happened as a result of the protests. And so it's powerful. And I also want to pause to say here, I just feel it in my spirit to say that our liberation is multifaceted. So I know I've been talking about the protest because it relates to law, but that is not the only way that we can work towards our liberation. So I just want to say that for anybody that, it feels like they're not involved in the protest or anything like that, we all have to be involved in various ways in creating calm spaces, in art, in music. Our liberation is multifaceted, and everyone has something extremely unique, to contribute to the world and contribute to this current process that we're going through. And I wanted to quote someone who, I learned a lot from, Mariam Hasna, who says, it's not enough to be anti-racist, that we also have to be pro-liberation. So I think it's important for us to fight. I think it's important for us to fight racism. And it's also important for us to be pro-liberation and kind of imagine the world that we want to live in and create that. So it's multifaceted, and all of us are doing different things, and we're all working together. And so I just felt that on my spirit to say for anyone, I didn't want to feel like I'm just focusing on protest, but that's because of the connection, that kind of made the New York State legislature, it just, like, these reforms just sailed through as a result of, pressure that was put on them from the protest. And so, but all of our contributions towards us being here, the time that we have on earth, are necessary. Our gifts are necessary to share with the world, whatever gifts that we have. So I just wanted to share that. And the other thing I wanted to say too, in terms of self-advocacy, I think I didn't finish something that helped me, that I learned from my father, who among other things, was a master, hypnotist, is just giving myself self-suggestions. And that's kind of along the lines of self-affirmations, but I do it like a more involved way. So I make sure I give myself positive suggestions, and just lay down, breathe deeply, relax. And before I begin, I kind of write down if I'm dealing, let's say if I have an exam or a big meeting or a project coming up that I'm nervous about, or what I do is I write down affirmations. And one thing that I think is important to say is that don't do the affirmations in the negative. So don't say, I will not be anxious. Instead, say that I am powerful. I am powerful. I am whole.
What just happened?
I will be, when I get up there to give that speech, or to work on that project, I will bring all of my brilliance to the table. I will have all of ideas will start flowing to me when I start to sit down to work on this project. So it's just important to frame your affirmations, or to frame it as something positive that you want to see happen. So that has helped me a great deal. That's just like a mini, self-hypnosis thing that, my father taught me, that helped me a great deal with situations or anything that I was nervous about. And I think that helps too, in terms of finding your voice to self-advocate and getting over any hump of anxiety, which is normal. We all have anxiety, or anything that might hinder sharing your voice. Does anyone have any contributions or anything there? Please. Slide.
Yeah. So thank you so much. We do appreciate that. So we are at 8:32. So Shawnee, I don't know if you have anything else before we move into the close.
No, ma'am. We can move forward.
Okay, wonderful. So Nefertiti, I'm going to put up your contact information with regard to the your offer for the community.
Thank you. Thank you. So if any of you in the Wake Up Everybody community, if you have a legal question, I can't promise that I can help, but I can promise that I can, at least give you some advice from a colleague. If you have, it doesn't have to just be criminal. It can be housing, it can be, employment or benefits or something. I will do my best. Just please put in the subject line, Wake Up Everybody community. So I'll know that, you're emailing me. Yes.
Okay. And you can share your contact information.
Yeah. So on the next slide that's up is, so I'm on Facebook as Nubia Kemet, on Instagram as honey_jollof, JOLLOF.ESQ, and email. My email is Nefertiti Ankra 777 @gmail.com. So yeah, you can contact me any of those ways, and I will definitely reach out to you and help, the best that I can.
Okay.
I can't receive a love offering.
Yes, you can, girl. I'm gonna tell you how. So, in this community, and for those who are here for the first time, I'd love to share this as well. We believe in the power of reciprocity. We also honor money in a way that acknowledges the energy exchange. So, money is an acronym for my own natural energy yield. And so just knowing what I know about you and your upbringing and your dad, and, just what you shared about what he taught you and what you still honor and activate in your life, what we speak into existence Also what we think, and it could be low vibrational, high vibrational. In this case, we speak the energy of money into your life and have it be ever flowing and ever abundant for you, Nefertiti. So in this space, we give love offerings via these two mechanisms. So Zelle Quick Pay, and you can utilize Soul Leadership Development at gmail.com to give a love offering that will go to Nefertiti, and also the admin team. It will be split 70-30. And then also we have a Cash App handle, which is $WUE community. And so whatever comes in today under the code #143NA will go to Nefertiti and the admin team. So wake up community. Let's continue to activate and manifest in this way and support the forward movement of our understanding about advocacy, our understanding about being able to be a stand for our community and us not being brutalized by those who are charged and paid to protect. And then also for us to be clear about how we show up inside of the law, because we have, as citizens, an opportunity to bring that in a really powerful, edifying way as well. So understanding is key, knowledge is power, and the application of knowledge is absolutely that as well. So tomorrow, goodness, I'm up, yay! So join me tomorrow in the Zoom space, and then also we'll be broadcasting on the Facebook page as we normally do, September 2nd. My conversation, my topic is right, which is shorthand for ritual, right, which is about using this apparatus, our hands, to write and generate words, ideas, emotions, and then also write, RIGHT, which is about balance and stability and being able to stand upright so that you can move forward on a pathway to the sacred. So we'll definitely be engaging in an interactive process that will activate all three of these and open up spirit so that we can do the things that we are ordained to do in the world. So please join me. It's a 30-minute segment and it will be worth your time and energy. Then after that, one of my favorite people on the planet, she is my coach. She is a powerhouse. I cannot wait. On Thursday, September 3rd, we have, through Zoom and streaming on Facebook, Dawn Speaks. And I'm like, Lord, you gave her the right name, because when she speaks, worlds open up. And her topic will be Take Your Time. And she's coaching me around my time and energy. And boy, am I learning a lot. I needed a no-nonsense coach, a coach that could sucker punch me and get me out of the space of thinking how I think sometimes that doesn't work. And she provides that on so many different levels. Coaches need coaches, counselors need counselors, gurus need other gurus to get them on the path of, just healing and transformation and balance. So please join us, set your clocks, and invite other people. We want more people in this space that have not been here before so we can keep expanding our community. So here's the schedule, screenshot it. Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, Zoom live, and then also broadcasted on Facebook, 7 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. We are here in the space amplifying the message of Wake Up Everybody. And then also Monday and Wednesday, 30-minute long sessions through the Zoom interface and Facebook, 7 to 7:30. Set your alarms for the difference between the two, but keep the same link so you can keep joining and transforming with us daily. Awesome. So we thank you for being present, Nefertiti. We thank you for being awesome. If you have not registered already for this week, use the bit.ly handle that is up at the top for registration. If you are not on the Facebook page, but you are in this Zoom space, please join. And the Facebookers who are watching, please join our Facebook page so that you can be about the business of getting the updates as they unfold, and then also sharing about your journey, because that's important. Our testimonials actually inspire and activate movement. And Instagram at Wake Up Series, and YouTube utilizing the bit.ly handle that is here and present. And then our email, reach out, info.wakeupseries@gmail.com. And now we're going to do what we customarily do in this space, which is to celebrate the facilitator for all the awesomeness that they are. I'm going to put it on gallery view on my end, but it may not be me. It might be John please put it on gallery view on your end to make sure that we actually have it up and running so we can all see one another. I'm going to invite the community to start the practice, and myself. Today I'm just looking crazy, so I didn't come on camera. But if you are able to, please come on camera so that Nefertiti can see the faces of the people that make up this awesome community. Thank you, Louise and John and Teresa and Amal and Charmaine. Thank you. Thank you. Ebony, you got that beautiful face. I love looking at your face. Let's see it this morning if you're able. Nija. So thank you all. So we're going to pour, Jacqueline, thank you, and Stacy, love into Nefertiti by unmuting ourselves and then just letting her have it in a good way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Good
Nefertiti. Oh
morning,
my God.
everyone. God
Right on
bless
Wonderful
time.
you.
information.
That
Thank
was
you.
The community.
Sharing.
phenomenal.
Whatever
That's
it is, whatever
absolutely
share
worth
you
me
get
getting
from
up at
Mo is
7
right on
a.m. this
time.
morning.
Thank
I
You
thank the
girls, love
King
you,
for that.
everybody.
You
lift
are
you
a
up.
unique
You.
gift
Love
from
you.
God. We
Yes,
appreciate you.
Nefertiti.
Thank you. Thank you. We
Information.
hope you'll come
Let me know if
again.
there's
Appreciate
anything at
knowledge
all
and
I can
appreciate
support
everyone.
All that you do for the
you and your
community.
mission.
Thank you for
Thank
sharing your
Have a
information
wonderful
with us.
day. Thank
God
you so
bless
much,
Thank
you. May
you.
you be
Nefertiti.
blessed
Thank you.
eternally.
Thank you,
Thank
Shawnee.
you.
Love you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Nefertiti.
Love you.
God bless you.
I love y'all.
Thank you.
Love y'all.
Thank you, Nefertiti.
God,
Thank you, Nefertiti.
y'all are so much.
Thank you,
Many
Stacy.
blessings, God bless.
Peace and blessings.
Blessings,
Thank
abundance.
Love
Thank
y'all.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nefertiti.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Nefertiti.
you. Thank you for
You
being
rock.
here.